Hello and welcome to the show with me, Gillian Gottsell. Today, I'm delighted to say my guest is Dmitry Buterin, who is the founder of Blockgeeks, a serial entrepreneur, and of course, father to Vitalik. So, Dmitry, or Dima, if I might call you that, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Hey, Gillian, sure.
Here, so I've been watching some of the videos that you've made, podcasts and different things like that. And I'm just interested, if you don't mind, just to talk a little bit about your upbringing in the old Soviet world. And how it compares to, moving, you live in Toronto now in Canada, but also the new Soviet world, if you like. It's obviously been very vocal in the war in Ukraine. But can I start back a bit about your upbringing and how you became a fully paid up member of the capitalist classes, if you like, from a very communist background?
Yeah, I mean, Soviet Union was very interesting. Like, I'm very curious how North Korea looks like from the inside. So Soviet Union was like there was a lot of poverty and hypocrisy, if you will. So everything supposedly is done by the state. State owns everything. State provides you with their living, with the employment, with education, with healthcare. So that sounds like paradise. However, all of that is an extremely poor quality, totally impossible to live on, and all of that, and the kind of healthcare, like everything is basically controlled and organized by one huge entity, the entity who doesn't really care about humans. It's just the entity, or at least all of the humans besides a handful of the ones that are at the top. So it was really fascinating. Like from the very young age, you were fed all of this propaganda. Like already, I remember when I was in kindergarten, maybe I was 5, and I was always a person who likes to kid around and joke. And I remember they made a joke about Vladimir Lenin. And I felt so scared, like, oh my God, like, this is a sacred cow. And they said something funny about the sacred cow, what's going to happen to me, right? So, and nothing happened, but it's like already at 5 years old, you kind of feel that this is the sacred cow and you don't touch them, right? And everything was basically built on lies and hypocrisy and everybody pretending to, like, there's this Soviet joke that we pretend to work, they pretend to pay us, right? And there was a lot of stealing going on. Everybody, people going to work, and if you work in a factory, then you try to bring home as much stuff as you can because you cannot survive. And then you work full time, then you still have to have some kind of like your own little garden where you grow vegetables and stuff, because again, this is the only way to survive. And because everything is planned and organized by the state, everything is very, I don't know, misconfigured, maybe I would say, call that, as like you can go and study for many years and become a teacher or a doctor or an engineer, and you will be paid a few times less than if you don't do any of that and you just go to a factory and you do some physical labor. So that was really, really crazy, right? So and that's kind of still the case,
I was going to say, because there was a change, obviously, and now it sort of seems to have
Well,
gone back. It's
yeah,
hard.
yeah.
It's hard looking
Well,
in.
let me finish, right? Like,
Sure.
just give you some background, right? And again, when you look around and you go to a typical store, and the store, let's say food store, right? And they would have just a few dozen of food items, and there would be just pyramid of canned fish and stuff like that. But anything decent, you would have to stand in long lines, and things like that you consider the basics, like a toothbrush or toilet paper. Well, because it's a centrally planned system that is constantly malfunctioning, then maybe toothbrushes are available this month, but not the next month because they somehow underestimated the demand of toilet paper. Toilet paper was kind of larger. People are using newspapers and stuff. So it's a really poor society, whether small percentage of people who are in the power, they're in their leaders of the Communist Party, people who are in like security services and whatnot. So, and basically by the time I was a teenager, it was possible to see through all of this, right? And again, in Russia, it's like here, let's say in the States, you have this whole concept of Boy Scouts and whatnot. And in Russia, and Soviet Union, you had the Communist Party, and but then there's like a youth communist movement and the pioneer movement. So basically, from the time you were like 7 years old, you were supposed to follow this path of like, going through all of these different organizations. They are feeders into the Communist Party. So I was that member of that, the youngest group, pioneers, and then when I was a teenager in school, and it was already clear that the system has started to fall apart. And I didn't want to join that youth communist party movement. And it was like kind of difficult to do because people around me telling me, but you cannot get into like a good university. You will have no prospects in life unless you kind of follow that, path that you're supposed to follow. So anyways, when I went into the university, and the Soviet Union does fell apart, and it was a really fascinating time to observe all of that. In a way, it was very difficult and painful because currency collapsed, all the savings, but the people had, they were wiped out. Everything was like people lost their jobs because nobody, like those stupid factories that they were producing tanks and all kinds of stupid stuff, they no longer really were able to employ people. So everything fell apart, and then everything was starting to rebuild, and it was very difficult, intense process. But it was also very exciting because you could sense a lot of freedom, something that was unthinkable before, that people could travel to the West, people could exchange foreign currency, people could watch, TV from abroad and movies and whatnot. Because again, like, Soviet times, foreign currency is illegal. Owning and exchanging that is illegal. Watching a foreign movie is a crime. Like if you have a video recorder and you watch a foreign movie, that's a crime, and your neighbors report you, and the police can, jail you for that. So Soviet Union was falling apart. Again, very painful, crumbling down of everything, the economical system, the manufacturing, and people were very lost. But also this kind of wind of freedom, if you will, and something new being born out of that corpse, so it was exciting as well.
Do you think it's gone backwards again then? Because I know you're very vocal in your opposition to the war.
Yeah, it did. It was like, so there were this, very tender new plants growing on the remnants of the corpse. And there was maybe a decade, less than a decade, when there was some hope and people were trying to go into politics and whatnot. But eventually, I think that what happened is that people who were in power in the old times, they found a way to get back into the power of this whole KGB with a new name, FSB. But it also became a new chimera because that state security apparatus merged with their organized crime, and then also decided to usurp their church, because in Soviet times religion and church was considered to be something bad and something that should be destroyed, and eventually they kind of reluctantly let it exist. But again, like all of the propaganda was growing with was that church and religion is awful, it's all about exploitation of people. But then again, like this new chimera that got born out of the ashes of the Soviet Union, it kind of ended up with the worst combination of everything. So it's the organized crime combined with the security service, and then they overtook the remnants of religion, the Russian Orthodox religion and church, and now we have this unbelievable chimera in Russia that is in power, and that's so you have this one guy who's been, I think he's the longest since maybe Stalin, if not the longest, right? So
Wow.
Putin's been in power now for 24 years. I think he might be getting there to one of the longest term of Russian or Soviet rulers, and everything just like for some time they seemed to get better, right? Because there was still some momentum from that opening up, and there was influx of foreigners and foreign money and foreign technologies and foreign businesses, and I saw how they were so excited to help Russia to rebuild itself and become something new and different, but that's not what happened. It ended up going backwards, and now it's like an extremely tight, tightly controlled tyranny, where they're basically a police state, where if you go on social media and you write something against the war against Putin, then you get thrown in jail, and for years, for many years, for like 20 years, or something ridiculous like that. But if you're just a crazy guy who kills his wife and goes to jail for that, and then you get a pardon, and then you get sent to war with Ukraine, and then you kill some more people there, and then you get a pardon, and then you go back into the Russian society, and now you're no longer criminal, you're now a hero. So the society is full of those kind of people. Like it's really fascinating for me to watch all of the transformation and to watch, from afar. So I've been living in
Yes.
Toronto now for 24 years, but I still have a number of friends and acquaintances that I communicate to in Russia. And some of them I don't anymore, because they are now telling me that I'm a traitor, that I sold out my motherland, did everything for me. And some of their, like my classmates, for example, many of them are fervent supporters of Putin and the war and everything. So in their eyes, I'm this crazy traitor who is saying all these sacrilegious things about Russia, and probably because I'm being paid by CIA or something like that. So that's what I've been told.
Oh man. So how do you think it makes you feel? How does it make you different, shall we say, from other people in Toronto of your age? How do you think how does it mark you apart? Or does it?
Well, every human being is absolutely totally unique, right? So you grow up in a particular society, you grow up in a particular family, in a particular environment. So my environment, my genes, my upbringing, they all shaped me to be a certain way, and that's what I am, right? And then here, Toronto is a fascinating place. What I really appreciate about it is because Canada is so open to immigration, and there are
Yes.
lots of issues I see in Canada, but there are a lot of awesome things about Canada, and I really love seeing how many different cultures, nationalities, ethnicities, religions are coexisting in Toronto, and I think that there's a lot of creativity and fun, and a lot of interesting stuff is being born out of that. So Toronto is really this boiling pot of many different races and cultures and religions and everything and viewpoints. And lots of people who came from Russia, people who came from Ukraine, and people who came from Russia. I have many dozens good friends, and I actually helped through my business. I helped like maybe at least 10, probably more, like 20 different Russian families emigrate from Russia to Toronto, and we stay in touch. And then I know people here who are from Russia, and they are lovers of the Soviet Union and lovers of Putin and all of that. So this is how it is.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me then. I'm just interested because it's interesting to be of an age to see such change. Do you know what I mean? So it's not you're younger.
Yes.
You're not as if you're in your 80s or anything. So you've seen so much change and lived through. So that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yes.
And then also, so slightly jumping topic slightly. I'm a bit of a segue here now, but obviously I said at the start you're Vitalik's dad. You're father to three children. What are your
Yes.
daughters doing? What ages are they now? And what are they doing?
12 and 15.
Do they have
So
ideas to be
they're in
IT?
school.
Are they interested in, do they?
Not, I don't think so. They have they seem to be quite intelligent, but they have different interests, and who knows, like my older daughter, she's really into arts and she's a really good artist. My youngest, she's a preteen and she's going through her own, big shift and worldview and self-discovery. So yeah, their lives again, like they're unique human beings at a
Yeah.
unique points in time and this unique different environment.
And do they have any concept of how famous their big brother is? Or is it like he's just Vitalik? That's it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that they pay much attention to that because they like their world economy, their cryptocurrency world, if you will, all of that stuff. The world of technology is not something that they deeply immersed in, so they have some kind of understanding of that, but it's not really
It's not
big deal. It's
not
not
relevant to them.
important aspect.
No, it's cool.
Yeah, I mean they're happy and proud
Yeah.
and they always enjoy kind of seeing him when he's here in Toronto. So
It's cool. So then tell me, going back to what I said at the start, you come from the Soviet Union, but you're a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, if you like, and you've been serial entrepreneur. What drives you to be an entrepreneur as opposed to working for somebody else? What makes you that type of person?
yeah. It's a great question because growing up, there was no concept of entrepreneurship around me, right? Like it just didn't exist. Everything is done by the state. Businesses are bad. Businesses are profiteering, exploiting workers, and all of that bullshit. So that was the propaganda layer in my brain, if you will. When the Soviet Union was falling apart, then you have to survive. So then, without thinking about it in any way, I ended up doing a few little tiny entrepreneurial things, like, with my friends at the university during the summer. We would buy a bunch of souvenirs in Moscow, like Russian matryoshkas and a bunch of other stuff. And then we would take buses and trains, the cheapest way of transportation to get to Prague in Czechia or Czechoslovakia back then. And that we would sell those souvenirs to their local network of people who then sell them to tourists, right? So,
Yeah.
and we would have a pretty decent markup on that. So stuff like that, right? And there were a few little entrepreneurial things that we had to be doing because there was no way to survive otherwise, because basically education is free. Okay, wonderful, but you still have to live on something and buy food and all of that. And my parents, they lost all of their savings in their crash of the Soviet Union, and also actually my hometown. That was a mini Ukraine situation, if you will, because they wanted that region in Caucasus called Chechnya. They wanted to go independent, and they ended up having Russia decided to protect Russians, and Russia basically just bombed that city into ruins, killing or driving out all of the Russians out of that city. So my parents, they had to flee, and they had to reestablish themselves in a new place basically from scratch, right? And I'm saying that so they all of their life had to be rebuilt, so they had no capacity to help their own children for a while. So for me that was kind of the background, like, okay,
Yeah.
so you have to survive, and then you end up trying those little entrepreneurial things, just like because you look for opportunities and everybody. And that was the time during the crash of Soviet Union when, on the one hand, there is this confusion and all the people who used to, okay, I'm going to work and I pretend to work and they pay me this money and all of this stuff. And this is gone. Oh, this is a tragedy. But then also, oh, wow, here's this opportunity. You know, I can buy those souvenirs and I can go to a foreign country and I can go into the supermarket and, oh my God, the supermarket has thousands more different items for sale than I ever seen in my life, right? And then you sell the souvenirs and you make some money on that, and it was very substantial. And some people ended up being very successful, building very successful businesses and becoming millionaires, billionaires and stuff like that. So I studied for software engineer, and I got my degree. But before even I finished university, I started working. I had to. I was a young father already by that age. And so I went and I worked for a bank for a little bit as a software engineer. And then I worked for an American company that was doing American consulting company in Moscow. That was helping their foreign businesses establish and build themselves up in ex-Soviet Union in Russia. And after doing that for a while, then basically with a couple of my colleagues, it was very kind of accidental. I think that my friend who was my colleague, and we're still good friends with him and have done a bunch of business together, he suggested that. And even though I didn't really have concept of entrepreneurship as such, but I had a few little experiments, and that was what was in the air. There were opportunities and new business were being established. So we started this new business back in Moscow, and that was my first entrepreneurial endeavor. And it actually became quite successful over a few years. And then after a few years, I moved to Canada and then built a number of businesses since.
Were you always going to move to the West, do you think?
Who knows? But I did, right? There was a bunch of circumstances that worked together. I definitely was curious to explore that. I always was curious about foreign languages. That's kind of one of my hobbies. I was looking forward to learning more about the world because, again, growing up in the Soviet Union, you're growing in a very, in an environment that is artificially isolated from the rest of the world. And so there was a lot of things that came together, and curiosity, a bunch of personal circumstances, the fact that Canada had a really open immigration policy, and if you were a software engineer with decent education and experience, and it was very, very easy back then to immigrate into Canada. That's what we did, and so that's where I've been living ever since.
So I understand that you introduced Bitcoin, the concept of Bitcoin, to Vitalik, but when you first came across Bitcoin, what did you think of it? Did you go, oh my God, this is amazing? Or, my parents mightn't have lost everything if they'd had access to Bitcoin? Or did you just think it was an interesting technology?
Yeah, it was pretty much just a curiosity. I didn't really pay much attention to it besides mentioning it to Vitalik, and I only really got interested in the crypto space more when Vitalik ended up being interested in that space. So kind of like as he continued to explore in that space and building up his career, then I got more and more immersed and interested in that. But before that, for me, it was just like technical curiosity. Oh, wow, look at this cool technology. It's a cool idea. Wow, how interesting. But that's it. There are many cool technologies.
You never thought that in terms of like transformational technology, empowering the disenfranchised, that didn't come to you at the start?
Not at the start. It did resonate with me because, again, growing up in the Soviet Union and seeing all of that propaganda and hypocrisy of that, and also seeing the total failure of the centralized socialized system, the failure of education, the failure of the healthcare and everything, I became very disenchanted with any kind of centralized, rigid systems. And so I became, in my, if you will, political views, much more libertarian. So that was kind of the background, right? So then eventually, as I got to learn more and more about Bitcoin, the technology also resonated with my political or philosophical views, if you will, about society.
Yeah. And how do you find people in blockchain and Web3? Do you prefer them to ordinary folk? Have you found your tribe, or is it?
We all humans, yeah.
Yeah.
So my tribe is humanity. Like people who are in a particular technology, again, there are all kinds of people, all kinds of races, and all kinds of psychologists. Like I I can say that there are lots of really awesome people in Ethereum space, and there are many other uh, blockchain communities, whatnot. A lot of them are seem to be focused on speculation and other stuff that doesn't really resonate with me that much. Bitcoin community is no longer really resonates with me that much, just because it seems to have become very rigid. And one of my personal learnings is that for any technology has to evolve, because the world is constantly changing and evolving, and it's impossible to hold on to a particular concept and idea. It has to keep evolving, and that's for me that what seems to be happening in Ethereum ecosystem. And I appreciate that this is the ecosystem that seems to be able to openly discuss problems, tackle them, address the problems and move on. And it's very messy. It's very disorganized. When
Yeah.
Vitalik was starting out, I was kind of trying, if you will, to impose my view of how things should be done because of my background in building businesses and whatnot. However, they've done it very differently, and I learned a lot from watching that very messy, crazy, disorganized, decentralized process. And there's a lot of beauty that came out of that, and I got to appreciate that aspect of life, like building a big centralized fragile system is how we used to do stuff. I mean, this is the armies, the church, the state, but they are all very fragile systems because they're supposed to depend on smart, reliable, well-meaning people at the top. However, people are not just that. People sometimes are smart and reliable and well-meaning. Sometimes they're scared, and sometimes they're angry. Sometimes they're very reactive. So the system that is based on this idea that there are some kind of idealized humans that can decide for everybody, I don't believe in those kind of systems anymore. So for me, decentralized systems that are working more based on a human consensus, they make much more sense. And they are, again, seem to be much less efficient and very messy, but this is how it is. If I look at a human being, there's no central place here that controls and tells, hey, dear heart, you have to beat with this rate. It's like lungs and my kidney and all of that. No, this is really a very complex system that self-regulates. So it's a whole society of systems within a human being that creates a human being as we see it, this very complicated, intricate, sometimes fragile and beautiful, messy system. So for me, decentralized systems is a better match for the way I see
How do
the
you
way I
cope
see
with
the universe.
democracy then? Are you a bit like Churchill, that it's kind of a messy way to rule, but it's the best compared to the others? Is that how you view democracy, perhaps?
I mean, this is our current best attempt at run things, and it's not just like one system, if you will, because there are all kinds of democracies. You can look at around and you can see different experiments. Here's the US, here's Canada, here's Scandinavia, here's Germany, here's France, and they all democracies, but they all different. So there's a lot of experimentation going on, and they keep evolving. And we are trying, and we're trying to make things better, and then we quite often end up building some new rigid systems, like going, let's do war on drugs. And we totally mess up, and we mess up the lives of millions of people. Or, let's do war on terror. And that blows up in our face, right? Or if I look at Canada, wonderful country, and I look at the healthcare system, which is totally messed up. Like, their lineups, their inability to consult with a specialist, all kinds of issues with that. But again, like this is how we live, how we build the society. If you will, we humans, we try stuff, we mess up, we eventually learn from that, and we evolve. And it's not a linear progression by any means, but so, democracy, sure, there are all of these experiments that we do, and some of them, they seem to be working better than others. And then they face some new challenges, like, the Western democracies are still struggling to face the new reality of what has happened in Russia, and also what they have helped to build in Russia in a way, and trying to evaluate that. So all of those experiments, we're constantly learning, and they will keep evolving. So I think this is awesome. This is for me, this beautiful, messy life, finding better and better way to, I know better is the right word, right? But this is just the flow of life.
Yeah. You were saying, I think I read someplace, maybe I heard you say that in Russia back in the day, you didn't really retire. You were as broke when you stopped working as when you were working. So you have retired now, haven't you? Because have you?
Yes.
So okay. So and you're retired. What are you doing? what occupies you?
Life is always full of different things, looking after my daughters and learning and playing with the world. Like for the last 4 months, I've been spending quite a bit of time playing with the generative AI, specifically with Midjourney, and in a way, you can say becoming an artist. I post dozens of images every day, and they fascinate me. So technology still fascinates me, and all of that, and things like, if you will, mentoring and advising human beings, and or sometimes businesses. So businesses consist of people. So really, for me, the focus is people. So supporting human beings and their struggle to find meaning, and they struggle to end their suffering, and all of that. So that's I find that fascinating.
You're kept busy because it's just it seems such a difference, like from, as I say, in Russia, where of old you worked until you practically much died, and now you have all this time. I often wonder what they would like to do when they retire, and it's just are you taking up new hobbies? Do you like new sports, new languages, new?
Yeah,
I mean, two small children, I
there's
suppose.
constantly this, like, I mean, they're not small, but
they're
sure, like
demanding.
languages are still my hobby. Like this year, I started learning Turkish, and it's very different from any other languages that I've ever played with. So, like generative AI and all kinds of cool stuff is constantly happening. So life is always full of different things, and now that I have a luxury of not having to be so focused on making money and building businesses and all of that stuff, so there's more, in a way, it's becoming more fertile. There's more playfulness and more ability to play and experiment with different things around me, and just follow my heart.
And who are you reading currently? I believe you're an avid reader. What are you reading at the
I
moment?
used to read a lot, and I still read a fair bit. It has shifted quite a bit too, because I used to really be. I had a very, if you will, analytical, scientific mind. So I was reading a lot about first about science and this and that, and then about many other things like building businesses and marketing and sales and psychology, and eventually about stuff like spirituality and whatnot. So whatever catches my eye, I come across, like, I currently have a few books open on my Kindle on different topics. I guess lately I read more books about, I mean, you can call it philosophy, but it's not philosophy the way you think about it, like at least not from my perspective, but it's like all the different ways that humans try to explain themselves and explain the universe and imagine what is life, what is being human, where is all of this going, and all of this stuff. And I have my own unique, very peculiar perspective that very few people can um, even understand what the fuck I'm talking about. So yeah, so I read maybe less. I'm less attached to knowledge now, if you will, because I find I can see knowledge used to be something that I was very attached to, like, oh, I know this is right, the other perspective is wrong, and all of that. And that has shifted a lot because I'm full of ideas and opinions and knowledge, whatever. And I can see that all of that is nothing more but just the perspective that is true to me. And that perspective is unique. And there are people around me, my friends and my son and my relatives, whatever. I align with them on a bunch of things, but then I have very different views on some other things with them. And that's perfectly fine because I'm not them, they are not me. This is how it is. Like, I really see that each human being lives in their own little imaginary bubble of how they see the world and what is true and all of that stuff.
Mm. Finally, what advice would you give to a young entrepreneur starting off? You're obviously very successful with your 3 businesses you've exited. What's the best piece of advice you could give?
So many answers I can give you to that, right? And the very first would be is I would give them advice to not listen to any advice because all advice is basically bullshit, because nobody has ever been the human that they are. Nobody has ever been in their circumstances. So that's one answer. Second answer is that also, on the other hand, humans over the years, they have developed a lot of models, a lot of ways to think about how to build a business. There are many amazing frameworks. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. You can think about you can find a lot of awesome business books that can help you think about business in a more structured way. This is a business, and here's what you do to manufacture whatever you do. This is what you do for business development, sales, and marketing. This is how you go about human resources and finances and all of that stuff. So that's the second point. Another one is, I will say that every business, end of the day, is a reflection of the human being who founded it, the founding team, and all the businesses that work in it. So understanding ourselves is key to that, because all of our desires and fears will be inevitably reflected in how we build the business and our thinking, how we impose that on people working in the business. So really, like, seeing that clearly is extremely important to being not just successful, because success is just one small aspect of life, but being happy, if you will, and with what you're doing, right? And so that's that.
Probably the best. And that's the same advice you'd give to your 16-year-old self, I presume, then. Don't listen, it's all bullshit.
I wouldn't, right? Because that person, like every human being, always how to put this, we cannot give advice to others because they don't exist in the same imaginary bubble that we do. Even ourselves, in a different point in time, well, the way emotions were handled here are very different now than they were handled when I was 16 or when I was 25. The way I was thinking about the different models about the world, they were very different. And the world was very different. Technologies were different and all of that stuff. So advice for me is a fantasy that we know what is the right way to do things. And I no longer believe in that because there's no right or wrong way, just like we will do things in a certain way and there will be many consequences to that, right? And you don't know how it plays out. Like every tragedy brings with itself the seeds of something amazing. And this sounds right, and this sounds very abstract and philosophical, but I have seen that in many different aspects of my life in a very raw, very visceral way, if you will. So yeah, that's very true to me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I love the fact that you're very strong on the uniqueness of everybody and how can we possibly,
Yes,
so even people within the same family can be very different because they have
absolutely.
their own
Yeah, I
perspective.
can see that in my children. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're unique,
actually,
right?
yes.
And I can see it. I can see it as a parent, right? How we do you have children?
I do, two girls, two grown-up girls, yeah.
Right.
Very
So I don't know
different,
if it resonates
very
with you,
different.
but I have, right, they are, right? And I have also noticed how my own fears and desires, they were playing out and like how I was projecting them to my children, like, oh, they should be doing this, they should be that. And, there is less and less of that thinking in me. It's more like I'm developing more and more sensitivity to where they are, who they are, and what is the way for me to support who they are and where they are. And there's no ideal answer to that. Like, for example, I've learned to be very disciplined, and that's a very powerful tool that has given me a lot of stuff, helped me to achieve a lot of stuff and build businesses and whatnot. And also that tool, because the human being here was so attached to using that tool, it ended up with so much suffering and unhappiness and all attachments, all kinds of stuff, because that was the tool. Like, we have to be disciplined, we have to do this and that. Well, so now I'm trying to, when I talk to my daughters, for example, I try to talk to them about the range of different tools. There's a tool of discipline, and this is where it's useful. And here are some other different tools: the tools of being sensitive, the tools of opening your heart, the tools of screaming and crying, and all of that. Like everything has its place in human life, and every life is unique again, as I
Yeah.
said so many times today, right? Because and there's no way around that, because the kind of challenges that you will face, the kind of tragedies, the kind of pain you will experience, the kind of opportunities, they will be unique. Like the world is totally different now, right? So that's for me the beauty and and also the helplessness of human life, is because there's no way to find control, to find the right advice, and to and find this stable state where you're just this. Because sure, you're this, and then you get sick, or a person close to you gets sick, or fucking Putin invades Ukraine, and people are now
Who could
scared
have thought of that?
of
Yeah,
nuclear war. Oh,
yeah,
there's COVID, right? Like,
yeah.
look at all of their things that come up. They
Do you
do
know what?
come
One thing I
up,
was going
and
to
they
say,
will come.
I've grown up girls, and over COVID, I learned the beauty of having grown up children because
Mm.
I've learned so much from them. Isn't that funny? Because like when I was their age, I was not half as evolved. They're like a vegan, vegetarian, animal lovers. They're totally they're just total feminists. They're just amazing women. And I wasn't half, it took me a long life to be where I am now, and I like myself now. Not that I always like myself, but I'm a much more evolved human being now. But my kids in their 20s are so much more. I don't know. They're way ahead of the pack. I feel like a child by comparison, and I learn so much from them, which is like I'm going, oh my god, and everything.
Yes.
They've taught me. They have, when I grew up, tattoos were not seen as good things, and obviously they're very popular now. But my girls have tattoos, and when they started getting them, they'd say, "Mum, we're getting a tattoo," and I'd be like, "Mum, that's that face. The face. Stop body shaming me." And it's and I thought I was a very progressive, liberal mom, blah blah blah. And so I had to relearn. So when they mentioned the next tattoo, I go, "Oh, that's lovely, darling. What are you getting now?" But anyway, that's the funny thing is I have to learn myself because just my conditioning, my little bubble where tattoos are not good,
Oh, totally right. And just giving this little example, I also grew up in a culture where tattoos are considered to be something really bad, and only people going to prison do them and whatnot. And eventually, sometime after 40, I ended up getting a tattoo.
Ooh,
and
what did you get?
A bunch of people in my family, what? Dima, are you going to get a tattoo? What's going on? And all of that. And there was some discomfort, and from my mom too, and I did get that. And then my daughters, they were like, "Oh, Daddy, this is cool." They like that, and then everybody ended up being comfortable with that and accepting that. And this is like this is also how we humans learn. New generations, they get to explore the world in new and different ways, and we did, right? So
no, I mean, I just say the joy of growing up kids is just phenomenal, and they kind of mind me now. I'm like going, well, that's nice. Not that I'm an old fogey or anything, but just it's like the balance of care is changing slightly, and they're, "Mom,
of course,
which is lovely. It's gorgeous." Anyway, I'm going on. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been really interesting to say. The more I listen to your other interviews, and you haven't disappointed today either, I like your outlook on life, and I think possibly that's your what you've given your son, is that for Vitalik to come up with Ethereum, that is such a, I always say that this part of the sector is all about unthinking stuff. So it's as in unthinking, not unthinking, but like rethinking stuff, reimagining. And I think possibly that's the gift that you gave to Vitalik, for him to look at something and say, "Oh, what can we do here? It's a little bit different." And he continues to do. I mean, he's amazing. But
right,
as you are yourself. So thank you, and I appreciate your time. And I'm so glad we finally got to do it. And thank you indeed for your time. It's really been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Nice to talk to you.